Homeschool Mom. Let's have coffee with Kelly Sage. Kelly is an in-person and virtual writing facilitator. She works with kids and she works with adults. And I don't know if you've heard me share a little bit about writing, but there is nothing more in my life that has helped both soothe me, heal me, teach me, fuel my creativity, and really just make me feel alive. I love writing. Everyone might not relate to the writing concept, but I think the conversation we have today might help to maybe get you curious about how you can pursue your creativity, how it can help you, and how you can develop you more. So I invite Kelly to join me and have a conversation about writing. Hey,
Good. It's nice to meet you.
I am well. How are you
Yeah.
doing?
So
You too,
doing
officially.
that,
Kelly,
but
where are you at
I
right
am
now?
in a
Besides,
I'm in my little camper office. So yeah, it's a quiet spot.
beautiful. Excellent. Yeah, me too. Well,
Uh,
actually, my entire house is quiet now. It's pretty weird being in that graduated homeschool mom
yeah,
stage.
so I
Tell me
started
about your
homeschooling about
homeschool
10 years
experience. Where are
ago,
you at in your
and
homeschool
my
journey?
oldest at the time was in second grade, and my youngest was 3. So I pulled him out of school and homeschooled him up through sixth grade. And then he was really craving like a lot more kids. Bloomington at the time had a pretty good size homeschool group, but they were littler kids. And it still seems this way that everybody, once they hit middle school or high school, they go on to actual school. So he did as well. So he is now a senior in high school and he has been in traditional
Yeah,
school since seventh grade. My daughter, on the other hand, is in eighth grade now, and she's,
beautiful.
I think, a lifer. She has zero intention of going to school. She really loves homeschooling. She loves how leisure it is for her and how much time she has. She's an artist, how much time she has for art. So yeah, so we'll be doing high school together. I'm imagining. Yeah.
That's a beautiful
No, yeah.
life. Yeah, I've had kids in both, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But yeah, I've and my experience too. There is something really special about the homeschooling through high school experience, though. I mean, it's all special because they're your kids, of course. But there really is something unique about that. Love it. That actually, I my second daughter did homeschooling high school, and she's now. I suppose
Oh wow.
theoretically she's out of post-secondary school and she's now in a
Yeah.
mentorship at a ballet company. So pretty cool. Yeah,
How many
yeah,
kids do you have?
pretty beautiful life.
Okay.
Say, say that again. 4. Yeah, my youngest is just in his first year of high school. So they say it goes by quickly, but they
Yeah.
are not wrong.
Yeah. No, I know.
Although in the
I
early
can't
years, it
believe
didn't
that
feel like that, of
I
course.
have a senior. It's
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really me and my first one, it's a little heartbreaking, honestly. Like each month that goes by, we're like one step closer to he's
I
gonna
know.
actually be going to a trade school. He wants to work for Porsche and do auto mechanics, and so he signed up to start in July. So we have like very few months coming. He's moving to a
Wow.
different
Is he
state.
staying in your area or is he moving away? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I feel for you. All 3 of my girls did too.
Yeah,
They're all across the country, so it
yeah, no matter
really is
whether you
something we have to talk
homeschool or
about more
not,
because
it's just
no,
like
it is as
how
hard as
you
it
think
sounds.
when
So,
they're born, you're going to have so much time, but that 18
no,
years is nothing. And I mean, in actuality, if we live into our 80s or 90s, it really is this like minuscule amount of moments that we get with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So my heart is with you because I launched, I launched my third just like a month or 2 months ago, and it didn't get
Right.
easier. I think it almost gets harder in a way because you're like, oh my goodness, it's going to end.
Oh,
The whole thing is going to end. But I don't want more
we're
babies.
completely empty
I guess
nesters.
it
You know,
is going to,
after a couple years, they're really happy. So I,
yeah.
yeah,
The more I
yeah.
hear about it, I'm like, okay, I can do this. This sounds cool. Yeah. Okay. That feels hard to believe. But anyways, I would love to hear about your
Yeah, sure.
writing story, where
So,
you began, when you began
well,
writing,
I,
and why
you
you
know,
did.
started writing when I was little. I loved to tell stories and loved creative writing and whatnot. And in high school, in college, I was an English major, so I took a number of creative writing classes, and then ended up becoming an English teacher. And my favorite classes were the teaching writing classes, which in the school I went to was very focused on creative writing. And so then, so I have been teaching for um, about 20 years, and I've done some sort of creative writing class, be it like when I was a public school teacher, I was an English teacher, but I also did like their creative writing class. Um, and then, um, and then when I left teaching to homeschool, there is a wonderful group here in Bloomington called Women Writing for a Change. And I had, prior to leaving teaching, I was there just as a writer. I needed time for myself. You know, I had two little kids. I was working, teaching full time. And so I started as a participant. And when I knew I was going to be leaving teaching, I went to the creative director and said, I'm about to be unemployed. Do you have any, work that, are you looking for any help? And it turned out that she was. And so it's been 10 years now that I've been part of that organization. And it's wonderful. I've led their youth programs. I did that for a number of years. But right now, because my own teaching online business has grown and whatnot, I just do an adult circle. So, we do semester, and yeah, so I get to tomorrow night I'll get to gather with 15 women and creative writing. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Nice.
And then I do a lot now online, so I teach internationally, and then throughout the United States, and a lot of people find me because of I think my experience and just the way that I teach writing. And so I get to do something with creative writing every day, which is like a dream come true. It's just really, yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh
know. I'm
yeah.
with you there. So
Yeah.
much
It
fun.
was always
Did
my
you always
favorite,
write
especially
too? Were you
creative
young when you
writing.
started
But
writing?
yeah, yeah, no, it felt like something that I wasn't a
Yeah.
great student, and I definitely did not excel in like math, anything where I had to memorize things. My brain is just not, it doesn't work well when it comes to having to memorize. So creative writing was a way that I could definitely, I felt, if I found confidence quickly, and yeah, I liked it because it wasn't awful. I could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're put here on the earth to do certain things. And when we do find the thing and we move or lean into it, whatever creativity it is, we just feel more alive. And like you said, confident. And I think that is just obviously the
Mhm.
compelling to do something
Absolutely. I
outside
think
the
so.
homeschool
Yeah.
mom
I
role
think
that's just
especially
uniquely
when we're
for you.
spending so much time with kids, whether it's as a teacher or a homeschooler or both, like just being able to be, not have to think about anyone but yourself. It, at least for me, and I definitely have spoken to other
Yeah.
women, it's the same. I feel like I'm much more patient. I have, just more bandwidth to be present with the various energies and things when I have taken time for myself. And for me, it needed to be more than just like taking a hot shower or something. Like I needed something creative to put. And so writing has definitely been something I've been really
Yeah.
grateful. I have a partner
Yeah.
who's super supportive, that has, even when we didn't have any money, and he was trying to get his PhD. He was still like, nope, Wednesday nights, that's your thing, you go write. And so it made a big difference. But
That's a wild coincidence. That was my night too. It was Wednesday.
often, or Barnes and Noble.
Were you also at Starbucks?
Oh,
Okay, so I'm in Canada, so we don't have Barnes and Noble, but and Starbucks was my like saving grace, which is hilarious because
yeah,
I don't really like Starbucks anymore.
yeah. So you can, if they're
Oh,
open late, then you
is that
can
right?
use them, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So what informs your writing? How do
Mhm.
you like? Are there certain books or
Um,
certain authors that have really taught
so
you
when I was
how
in
to engage in
school, the
that?
authors that we were, given as models were women like Nancy Atwell and Leela Christianberry. And those women definitely, there's another one who of course just like went out of my mind, but she'll come to me. Nancy Atwell would probably be the one that was the most influential and continues to be the most influential. Have you heard of her before? No, she's actually a
I know the
teacher,
name,
and
but I
she
can't think.
came
Is this
up
short
kind of
story
with
writing?
the whole writer's workshop. She was in an experimental school up in Maine, I think, and was able to really look at how to teach reading and writing in a workshop setting, because she had small classes. It was a private school or a charter school or something. And so she's written a ton of books. One's called In the Middle, another one's called Lessons for Writers. She's done books on poetry, but they just have these great mini lessons and lots of resources for teachers to teach writing in a way that is looking at what writers do rather than what a textbook tells us to do. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I had it affirmed when I was engaging my kids in writing projects as I was homeschooling that I appreciate all of the writing programs out there, the more formal type ones. I understand where they're coming from, but as a writer, my goal was to get clear on what I really thought about something, or a story around what I really thought about, or a way of formulating concepts that would be understood by someone else. And that could be facilitated by grammar and, punctuation and all the basics of writing and the mechanics of writing. But if I didn't have that first part figured, then the second part didn't matter. And I think we teach from the second part and assume that the first part should come somehow, but it doesn't. And in this world, in my experience, in this world, we are always teaching how to do the basic stuff instead of exploring like the human psyche or like what we really think, because we're always so group thinking oriented instead of what's your
Yeah, no,
experience of writing
I,
versus
I,
mine
I
or
very
whatever it
much
is.
agree. And my
So yeah,
husband, who's a
that's interesting.
professor, not in English, in anthropology, but he certainly reads a lot of college students writing, and he's constantly frustrated because there isn't a whole lot of critical thinking or complex thoughts or unique ideas that and I don't think it's because the kids don't have it. I think it's just they've never been asked, and it is a practice. There's a confidence behind it, and so that's one of the main
Yeah,
things that I always try to do in my teaching is to just get kids confident enough to be vulnerable, because writing is a vulnerable thing. It's like art, music, anything. You're kind of putting your heart on the table, and there aren't rules. Yes, we can go teach the grammar rules and the spelling rules and all those things, and I do think those are important. But I think it's much, especially if kids aren't encouraged early on to really find their voices, it's hard for them to feel that confidence to be able to say what they're thinking or their ideas. And I mean, I now, have women in their 80s who are coming to our writing circles and for the first time in their lives are sharing their stories and their voices. It's very empowering. And here that there are young girls that are getting to do it in fourth and fifth
yes.
grade, and they're like, what would my life have been like if I had had that opportunity So important that we, yeah.
Yeah. But it,
Oh, it
you
is.
don't really
It
watch
is
them come
very,
alive, even at
it
80
is
or 90,
beautiful.
as you're
And
saying.
yeah, so I think that, for me, I always want kids to find interest first, to think about what are they interested in. They've already found it. It's not, they're not, but like find interest within writing by tapping into their interests. And then, we start to build their confidence and looking at other writing and how can we start to create different pieces. And then actually the last piece for me is always the grammar and the spelling, but it's within their writing, because some kids just kind of intuitively start to pick stuff up, and then other kids, a lot of my work has been with children who have dyslexia and other ADHD and autism and whatnot. So, some of those kiddos need some real and direct instruction, which is important. But I still have them start off with just getting your ideas on the page, and then I can really see what do they know too.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? It's funny because, well, this isn't funny, but my father-in-law is a elementary school principal, and I was working with an author when I was writing a lot of fiction. I was working with an author, Gail Anderson Dargatz. She's the author of The Cure for Death by Lightning and The Secret Life of Bees. And she was telling me, like, she's a celebrated author and she's got awards, and she says, write crap, put it down on page, just write crap. And so here I am telling my kids, write crap, to start with write crap, which really doesn't sound like something you'd find in Rod and Staff textbooks. But anyway, so then I said that, and I said it in the confines of my home. But when my kids were talking to their grandpa, they said, well, mom says to write crap.
Are you familiar with
Anyways,
Anne
that
Lamott?
didn't go over great.
Okay, so she has a great book called Bird by Bird. Yeah. And
Yes.
one of her first chapters in that, which I have brought to older classes before. I've definitely brought it to my women's classes, but I had a couple like senior level creative writing classes that I brought it to. And that's her whole thing, except she uses the S word. But to write a really first draft. And I think about that all the time. And in fact, when my husband
Yes.
was writing his PhD and he was or his dissertation rather, and he was just frozen with fear, of trying to, it was like, I gave him that essay. I'm like, look, this is what you've got to do, because otherwise it becomes so incredibly painful.
Yeah. I mean, there have been moments for me, like someone recently in my homeschool mom room, which is like a weekly event that we have in a paid homeschool mama support group. But I will include writing projects or writing conversations or times that we have together. And someone had asked me recently, but what do you do when you actually don't see things the same way, say 10 years from now? And I'm like, yeah, what do? You delete it if you can. And also, yeah, you just have to own the fact, like it goes back to that vulnerability discussion, that when you are writing and you're putting down your heart on the page, you might actually disagree with yourself at some point, or you might look at it and say, geez, I did not know how to spell counselor, which is still a challenge for me, or how to put commas into a sentence, which is still a challenge for me. And yet, I don't know. There's something about the mere act of owning what you think and being vulnerable and declaring, this is how I saw it.
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah. No, I
shifted,
think
or
so.
now
And
I
I
see
think
things
the more we
differently.
write, the
That
more we
makes you
grow.
more
So that
confident.
if you're seeing change, that's a good thing. That means that,
Yeah.
that you're learning and you're growing and you're evolving and
Yeah.
all those things. And so I don't think that's a bad thing, Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I mean, for sure. Like
You're
if
just in front of
there are
people.
times when I look back at old blog posts that I wrote, in 2017, and I'm like, wow, that has a lot of I need to clean that up. And if I were to read things from my college days or my early teaching days, I guarantee I would feel the same way. But I try to have some grace and understanding for myself, because at the time that was the best I probably could do. And I think we can offer that same thing to our kids, knowing that, where they are right now as writers isn't where they're going to be a year or 5 years or 10 years. And I know
Yeah.
there can be a lot of fear. I see fear oftentimes in, like, my kid can't write, my kid can't write. And it's like, okay, well, we're gonna work towards it, but it's not like a quick fix. Like, there's nothing I can do to all of a sudden make your kid a proficient writer. Like, it takes practice and time, and they'll get there. That's the beauty of homeschooling, is that we're not in this 6-week race so many kiddos and teachers are in. We really can
Yeah.
take the time that the kid needs. And I think writing needs time for a lot of people.
Do you know what's funny is when I was in high school year or pre-high school even, if I had something due on Monday morning, I started at 8 o'clock on Sunday night. And I'm not kidding. That was me. And now, because when I work on something, like I was helping my grade 10 aged kiddo yesterday with an essay, and he's got an amazing thesis, and I'm like, how did you do that? Because I could not formulate that stuff at that age. And then he tells me, yeah, I gave a bunch of ideas to my teacher and we were talking through it, so that's part of the reason. But it was really well crafted. And I said to him, I would just do this like the night before. And now I see him working at it successively, like a little bit well, actually quite a long time over the last week or so. He spends a lot of time with it. And then at one point I said, just put it down, because you're always going to be able to correct it. There's always going to be one more thing with writing, but you've done great. And so just let it be, learn from the lessons that you get. If someone explains, have you considered this, or maybe we could look at that, or maybe you could construct this a bit differently. Just take it as it's given to you, and then you'll learn a little bit more for the next time. But I'd love to hear what you would say are some really useful approaches for moms to
Yeah.
incorporate a writing
Well,
practice, because
the
that is
first one,
often the
which
conversation
I
I'm having
I
too.
have said to moms, and they don't necessarily like this, but I think it's actually the most important one, is to write with your kids, because I think that modeling is one of the. I mean, we can say things until we're blue in the face, right? Like, we can, but there's something very profound about seeing your parent writing or seeing them reading. Like, when we're interested in something, it one is going to make it seem like, oh wow, that is important, mom's taking the time to do this with me. It's also going to allow you to be in the moment with your kid, which is going to keep their attention more, because it's easy if I were to say, for instance, with my children when they were younger, if I was to say, like, I want you to write right now, and then I went off and started doing the dishes or got on Instagram or did whatever, if they weren't interested in writing, they were not going to do it, or it was going to be really like half done or something. But if I said, okay, we're going to do some creative writing, and I grabbed my journal and I'm like, do you want to write inside or outside? And then they chose, and then I said, okay, I'm going to set a timer. I'm a big timer person. Some kids do not like timers, but I have found the majority it's really helpful, because it means that they're not going to be writing forever, especially if they hate writing. So depending on the age, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like, let's just see how much we can write in this time. And then I do it with them. And that has been super successful for many, many years with a lot of kids, my own included. So that's one thing, is I think if you want to create a writing practice, you need to write with your kids. Another thing is, I think you have to offer a lot of choice. And that includes choice in location, if you can, choice in how, like, what they write with. Do they write with pen, with marker, with crayon, with pencil? Like, let it be fun. And then the topic that they write about, I think, is really important. I saw a question here: what makes you interested in writing when they could care less? And I think there's two things that can help. It's not a guarantee, but it can help. One is encouraging them to write about what they are interested in, and then choosing the genre that fits that interest. So, for instance, when my third grader my oldest, he Minecraft was just coming to be. He was so into Minecraft. He wanted to play 24/7. I wanted him to write. And so one of the things that he did was that he would create a choose your own adventure. And so he would write the whole choose your own adventure, and then he'd build the world, and then him and his
Mm.
friends or me, we would have to go through and do that based on his story. Um, you know, my daughter wants an art business and has been very entrepreneurial ever since she was little. And so it's like, okay, well, let's create a business plan then. So, I mean, it does, you know what I mean? Like, so we can kind of sneak in the writing in different ways, but make it authentic and meaningful to them. They're going to be way more interested in writing. It was kind of like when my daughter was really resistant to reading, but she really wanted to be around animals all the time. I told her there were these homeless animals that really needed attention, and they really loved to be read to. So we went to the, you know, the animal shelter, and she read to all the strays. But it's also like, you know, it's a good
Beautiful. Yeah.
compromise. Hey, I want
Clever.
you to do this, you want to do this, how can we figure out a way to do it together?
Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah. And I even think when they're really little, like creating the practice, if you can, when they're really young, if they come to you and share their stories or they share their dreams in the morning, then get a piece of paper out or get a journal out and then write it out for them and show them your story and then read it back to
Yeah.
them in the week or,
Yeah,
you know, at
no,
lunchtime.
scribing is
And
so
then they're like, oh,
helpful
I wrote that.
for a lot of kids. And I see the comment about the child with special needs. So when I taught at a school for children with dyslexia and other special needs, we used a number of really great assistive tools. One was called Dragon, which I'm sure now, this was 10 years ago plus, so I'm sure now there's even better. But it was a speech to text program that I really loved because the kids would speak, they would tell their stories into the microphone. It would type up for them. And then not only could they then see their whole story, but then they could click on it and it would read it back to them, which allowed them then to, one, get to hear their story, especially if they were struggling readers too, but it also got them to be able to start editing and revising independently, because it would, you know, it might read over, they're like, oh, I don't like that, and then they could start, it gave them a lot of independence. But I love speech to text, I love scribing for kids, typing them up. I don't see a problem with any of that.
Oh, because it's still, I mean, it's maybe using just different areas of the brain that use or that are focused on writing or reading, but they're all complementary. And so you're encouraging all of them differently, maybe different times. I actually use speech to text all the time for writing because I think a lot faster than I type now. And I write so much. Like I write a lot of my day. If I'm not coaching, I'm writing. And now I use, what is it called? There's some AI program that I use. But I was going to say for kids that aren't particularly interested in writing, you could also go on AI or Chat GPT or something and write in, you know, create 10 prompts for Minecraft or whatever's cool right now, because I would not know at that age. But you know, whatever it is around this thing, and make it fun for my
Yeah,
8-year-old.
yeah. Oh,
If you do something
absolutely.
like that, it'll
And
come up
some
with
of my
really
younger
clever
kids, I was
ideas for you.
working with a little girl today who she's in Taiwan and she's learning English, and her mom wants me to do creative writing with her. And so one of the things that she loves making is comics, because she loves to draw. She's just learning English and learning how to write. So it's a nice combo, you know, because it's not so daunting that she's writing tons and tons. And, you know, so many of our kids who maybe are more reluctant readers are also reluctant writers, but they like graphic novels. What genre are they into? Would they be interested in creating in that same kind of genre, like a graphic novel? And you can also find all sorts of great templates and stuff online. You know, if your kid doesn't like, if they're not into drawing, there's Canva and other programs where they could create the images them, without having to be artists.
Yeah, that's really good. A good point. And I know for a long time, because we have been infused with the Charlotte Mason concept in homeschool, that you don't want, what's the word,
Yeah,
a certain kind of
I
literature,
think
like
it's
a
like
light,
fluff or
fluffy
something.
kind of
Yeah,
literature. I can't think of the
I
word, if
much
anybody remembers what I'm
disagree.
talking
So I just say that right now.
about. But yeah, I, with that, like originally I had all things very classic literature. And I mean, still to this day, my favorite novel is To Kill a Mockingbird. Um, it's so well crafted, but at the same time, it's still writing and it's still literary. And if your kid loves doing it,
Yeah.
then I gotta say, my third kiddo was like really into Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and not doing the same kind of classical literature that I was doing with my two oldest on her own time. She was
Yeah.
reading that
Oh,
stuff,
for
but I
sure.
still
No,
think
I
it's
I very
reading.
much
She
agree
loved
with
it.
that. I mean, one of the things I remember my reading professor saying is you got to know your kid, or know your students and what's going to work best for them. And again, this is the another one of the gifts of homeschooling is that we don't have to do the same thing with every single kid. And that I'm much more concerned with kids reading than I am what they're reading. Because I think that eventually they may pick up something like To Kill a Mockingbird. But if they have not read or they've just pretended to read or they've, that will be very challenging. And some kids won't ever need to read those things, like, and they'll be just fine. They're still highly intelligent and will make it just fine in the world. I used to, when I taught in public school, I had to you had certain books you had to teach every year. And in ninth grade, and I think it's still this way because I have tutored a number of ninth graders, it's Romeo and Juliet. Half of my students, um, they
Yeah.
were in high school, but they could not read more than maybe a third grade, fourth grade level. And so to give them Romeo and Juliet, they also hated school. And Romeo and Juliet was about as far from their life and what they were experiencing as you could get. And there's this wonderful author. She's written so many wonderful books. Her name is Sharon Draper. Her most recent series is called Out of My Mind. But she wrote a book called Romeo and Julio. And it is the best young adult retelling of Romeo and Juliet. And so that's what I would do with my students is we would read Romeo and Julio, which they would like come in and be like, Mrs. Sage, when are we reading? Are we reading today? And the bell would ring and they'd still be like, they were hooked. And these were not kids that like to read. And then we watched the movie Romeo and Juliet with the more classical language. So they were still exposed to it. I pulled out little sections so that they could read and, have experience with the language. But I bet those kids knew that story, that play better than the kids who had to muddle through the traditional language. Oh,
Yes, I had no appreciation for Shakespeare in high
right.
school. Not understand this cauldron thing in Macbeth. I'm like, spending an entire hour on this. Now I've come to understand
Yeah.
the guy has talent, and apparently other people knew this. Few talents, but Charles and Mary Lamb was something that helped me to condense or simplify somewhat some of the narratives, the Shakespeare narratives for my kids. It was still pretty lengthy, but at least it helped to expand my understanding of it a bit. Um, and Hamilton, I mean, my husband absolutely loves Broadway theater of all that, and
Was actually meant to be seen, not read. And so I think you get a lot more out of it if you can be in, if you can see it. At least the films aren't horrible. There's several of them that are pretty good, but like if you could somehow go to a little theater and see it, I think adults too are gonna have so much more meaning than if they just are reading it. And reading Shakespeare out loud with children is really painful. So I would rather professional actors do it. Yeah, it's,
Yeah, that's like teaching kids violin
yeah,
lessons. I did that and kind of painful. Yeah. um, I was going to say about the, yeah, Shakespeare. Actually, we did, it was very simple and it would not, I'm sure nobody that is in the Shakespearean world would appreciate what we did, but I had this very simple workbook that I found at a homeschool vendor or a convention at a homeschool vendor hall, that was about putting miniature plays together that were based on the plays. And it was super, super simple, but just the mere act of, you know, creating costumes and knowing a little bit of the plot and then playing it out in the
yeah,
backyard together, it
yeah,
did help to create you
yeah.
know, a
Oh,
starting point, I
absolutely.
would say.
Yeah,
To
anything that we can
It was
do
fun too.
to make reading and writing more interesting, more hands-on, I think it's going to help so many kids. So that.
Yeah, super fun.
Me
I
too.
know that I could talk about reading and writing all day long.
I'm seeing
Have you?
one
I'm
of the
at that
comments
age.
says,
I
I'm a
can't
big
actually read
reader. My
anything that's
boys see me read, but the
on
only
the
time I
screen.
can get my teen to read is when it's something biographical like David Groggins, but he's 15. So, I'm also a big reader. My husband is not. He will only read for work. So I guess he is a big reader, but he's not someone who wants to like cozy up with a book, which was really strange to me. When I realized he was like that, and with my kids, I expected, since I was such a reader, my mom was a reader, that I was going to have these kids that wanted to do the same. And they liked to read alouds. We did a lot of read alouds when they were little, but then they got to be, my daughter's still a little bit. I think she's more humoring me, but my son definitely was like, "I don't want you to read to me anymore, Mom." Yeah. And not a read. And I will say, despite how many read alouds we did and how much I encouraged, and the fact that I'm an English teacher, he is not a reader, but he is a listener. Every night he goes to bed with an audiobook. They are comfort to him,
Yeah.
and he has, yeah, he has listened to many, many books. And when he was, even in his honors English classes, he would just get the audiobook. He would listen to it, and I didn't have a problem, with him doing that. So that would be one thing, is maybe a kiddo isn't a reader, but he's a listener, or they're a listener, because I think that audiobooks have so much value. And then, I mean, I also think we just have to like remember that like our kids are not going to like the same things that we like. They're going to like, like things. He's really into building things and math and science. I am not. I don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, yeah,
Sounds like my,
yeah,
yeah, he's all into chess. And I'm like,
right.
the
Yeah,
horsey boo. Learned, having had, like, my youngest is almost 15 now, my oldest is 22, and you can try to force things, but in my experience it won't work, and also it will interfere with relationships somehow. So it doesn't serve to do that. And also sometimes kids do come to something they, I had a kiddo that didn't really like reading heavier stuff, and then she asked me to get Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiography, and I
yeah,
was like, why? But it was heavy reading.
yeah. No,
So
that's very
they
true.
won't
And my
necessarily stay the same.
youngest, she also mostly listened to audiobooks up until, so she's 13, up until honestly this year. And she started going to the library on her own more, and ended up, I think I just naturally always, when we go to the library, we'd go to the children's section, or we'd go to the young adult section. Well, now when she was on her own, she started wandering around, and she found the adult section, and he has now, I mean, today my husband returned a stack of books that she had read that was
Yeah.
like this high, you know, I mean, it was a ton of books. Um, she calls them light romance. I wouldn't have thought to give them to her because that's just not, I don't care that she's reading them, but it just wasn't something that I was thinking. I was thinking that she was more into the books that, you know, were in the teen section, not, you know, books about adults. But she loves them. And she, you know, is reading thick novels in just a couple of days and then is excited to tell me about them. So sometimes it just takes a while for people to find their book too. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That was even
Right.
me. I didn't really read until I was 17. I could, I didn't want to read. Made up for lost time. No problem. Yeah, for sure. So if we're homeschool moms, to create a writing practice for them as well, you know, you and I both said Wednesday night is when we would go away. For me, it was like a life preserver just to get all the thoughts in my head on paper. And it was almost like cheap therapy, being able to clarify what I was thinking and, you know, seeing the positive benefits of homeschooling or the not so positive benefits of homeschooling. That's a lot of what I was writing at the time. Of course, I was doing all sorts of, you know, I do other writing as well. But
Mhm.
what would you say for
I mean,
homeschool
I
moms
think
that are
the
trying
first
to eke
thing
out
is
time to
to,
write?
you know, get a journal, get something that you can write in, or open up a blank. Some people like to type, open up a blank page. And, you know, for the adult circles that I lead, we use timers as well. And that can be helpful, especially if you don't have a lot of time. And then one of the things that we always say in our adult writing circles is to try to get ahead of the inner critic, you know. And I say this to my kiddos too, because we all have this, you know, like inner critic that sits on our shoulder or somewhere. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about it being like a little monster that tries to like drive the car, and she like pulls up a chair for it and stuff in her book Big Magic. Anyway, I think we have, so what's helpful about setting the timer is that if you can say to yourself, all right, I'm going to write for 10 minutes. I'm not going to worry about spelling or grammar. I'm not going to worry about being exist, and I can put them on the page, and I can close the page and the page will hold them for me, and I can keep going.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. That, yeah, it's been powerful for me. And I know when I'm working with other moms, and even when they're declaring something, just verbally saying something and realizing, did I just say that? That sounds like, I can't believe I said that. And we all have that. I have those moments too. But when people get clear on what it is they think, then the energy inside our brains, like the overwhelm, the frustration, it just dissipates because we're like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what we're
Oh,
dealing with.
absolutely. I
And
know.
it
And,
just gets
you know,
clear.
and
So cheap therapy
there's
for sure.
somebody, I'm trying to remember who it was. It may have been the woman who wrote The Artist's Way, Julia. Yeah, I think, you know, she talks about doing morning
Cameron,
pages, which
yes.
is about
Yeah,
trying to write
love
like
her.
4, I think, handwritten pages. I feel like that's a lot personally. Like I've never had that much time every day to get that down. So if I get a page down, I'm happy. Like that feels. But she talks about not going back and rereading them. Yeah. No.
No, I have stuff I would never reread it. But sometimes, you know, because I write so much that I look at all of the stuff I create, I'm like, just like what's going to happen to all this at the end of, I'm pretty sure someone's just going to have to back up a garbage truck and because there's too much. I'm
I do
pre,
too. Yeah.
so I've got a lot
No,
of
I know.
journals.
Sometimes I'll go back and reread, and
Yeah.
honestly, we do this exercise sometimes. It's like you think back of like, who were you 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And um, I don't know. I have a lot of love for that Kelly, who was struggling with that thing. And hopefully, if I go back and reread, hopefully that thing has kind of resolved and it's not as heavy or big as I thought it was at the time. And now there are new things, of course, there's always things, but no, I can't imagine mothering, teaching, homeschooling without my journal. Yeah. Yeah.
That's quotable. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly
And for,
am
for those
kindred
people who
spirit
don't
because
like writing, again, speech to text, having some kind of thing that you can just speak into and say
yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah,
I know there's lots of women out there who do that, and that is just as helpful. Like, I don't think you have to be a writer, but I think there is something about releasing it, and that's really helpful. Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. And then own your voice, say what you think. And, there's some times where I do look back and I think, oh, geez, did I say that? Yes, I did. But at the same time, I go, yeah, but that's kind of like what happens when you own your voice. You you just come more alive. That's what I think. You come more alive. You become more confident. You really do clarify what you think. And frankly, just like you were speaking right now about looking back 5, 10 years ago, looking at yourself with compassion, I also am able to look at other people and say, you know what, that's where they're at right now. And that's what they understand the world to be. That's how they see things. Their vantage point is different from mine. And so then I can give more
Exactly.
grace there,
Exactly.
just
And
like I
with our
could give myself
kiddos,
more grace five or
that's
ten
one of the
years ago.
reasons why I think allowing them to choose their topics is so important, because, you know, what they're thinking about in their moment is different than what we're thinking about. And so while maybe, when my kids were younger, I didn't find the same joy as they did in reading their stories about dragons, or these kinds of things, that was really important to them at the time. That was, and then when they started getting into more other topics or whatever, what's important to them may not be important to me, but I still cheered them on, I guess is what I'm saying. In the same way that when my son's like fixing his car and I go and I'm like, oh yeah, show me. I don't care, but I care about him a lot. Find interest. And so I think we can do that for our kids when it comes to what they're reading, what they're writing. No, I don't really want to have a discussion about this book, but you do, and I want to support that. So I'm gonna do that for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
heart. Yeah. And when
Oh,
we write, we
it
honor
was
our
so nice
hearts.
to
Yeah.
you. I would
Thank
love
you
to
so much
talk to you
for
anytime,
sharing time
Teresa.
with me today. We should definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I hope you have a really lovely day. I can hear my goats bleating in the
Well, I
background. They seem
heard
to
them,
make an
so
entrance
all
every
is well.
time I go live.
All right.
Good, good to hear.
Thanks.
Time to go feed the goats. It
Bye.
was a pleasure. Yeah.